Hello and welcome back once again to Organic Cardboard. My name is Owen Kneep, and today I want to take a look at Oros, and more specifically I want to review the solo game of Oros. Oros, if you're not familiar with the game, this was made by a fellow named Brant Brinkerhoff and produced by Lucky Duck. Now this game, the general idea of it is that you are a demigod. Each one of the players is a demigod, and these demigod act as a shaman of sorts. You can kind of think of the game really reminds me of the game Populous from Populous the Beginning. If you're familiar with that game, it was a computer game that came out in the 90s. Now the game doesn't play exactly like Populous the Beginning, but the overall kind of feel of it is similar. You have like a lead shamanistic kind of figure that is able to manipulate the land. She's going to have, or he's going to have, either one. I think there's even two women, two men demigods that you can pick from. But they are going to have followers that they're going to use in order to gain wisdom, and that wisdom is going to allow them to have stronger abilities throughout the game and eventually start actually gaining points, which is the point of the game, is to get points. So these again, these demigods are going to have followers. They're going to have a board that these followers are played on that have the different actions available to them. And then as they're using the followers to take their actions and manipulating the board, they're trying to increase the size of the land tiles. You have like kind of like a flat world that everything is shifting on. It's like a big water space with little square grid built into it. And so these tiles shift in interesting ways. The world is connected from one side to the next because it's kind of representing the full, spherical world on a square, gridded, flat game board. But what I'm getting at is that when you push a tile off to the left, it reappears over to the right. And as you're shifting tiles around and smashing them into each other, you're going to create stronger, not stronger, but larger land tiles. Moving up from a level 1 land tile to a level 4 land tile, and at that point you can then take those 4 land tiles, mash them together to make an immovable mountain, and that mountain is then stuck there. But that mountain is the bedrock of one of your sacred sites. So then you're able to build sacred sites that give you, again, abilities to get wisdom and move up an ascension track. And the ascension track is kind of what your demigods are ultimately trying to do. They're trying to kind of become the most revered and wise representation of nature's spirit that they can be. They're representing, we've got the living sun, great waters, fertile land, the raging fire. So each one's being represented in a human form. And again, kind of doing this plate tectonic land manipulation. It's really fun, though. It reminds me of those little puzzles that you could get. I feel like I used to see them a lot as a kid back in the early 90s. I'm sure they're still around somewhere, but they're those little tile puzzles that when you shift one over here, you got to shift the other one. You want to get this piece over here, but you only have one space open on the puzzle, so you're having to shift everything around each other to get the puzzle together. So you kind of got that thing going on a little bit with this game. And the volcano idea is really cool if you overload a land. So like if you if you have you can only create mountains by shifting the 2 4 size land tiles together. But if you move a 4 into a 3, there is one special ability that you can upgrade in order to make this a mountain as well, but normally that 3 would just become a level 3 volcano on top of that 4 land tile. And at that point, you could take another action to erupt that volcano and that eruption will it'll fill up the land up to a level 4 that it's sitting on, and then it will flow outward and create new land. So it's kind of neat how that happens, and you can direct the flow of it as you go. So again, kind of has that populous the beginning feel a bit to it. You could do volcanoes in that game. You could create land out of the water, and you could kind of shift things around and cause like earthquakes to happen that would kind of break up the land. So you're kind of getting to do that with the shifting ability on this game. But the workers are again how you're taking all of your actions. You're going to get 3 actions in each of your turns, and those workers are going to take up the spaces that are available on your player mat. So your player mat has got like 6 sections that you can take turns on, and anytime you have one of your workers on one of these sections, you cannot place another worker there. So in order to take that action again, you need to move that worker to a new space, and then you'll be able to, on your second action for your turn or third action for your turn, take another worker or the same worker that you just moved and move it back onto the space that you want to use. And those spaces are going to include shifting tiles in one straight line, either vertically or horizontally around the board. And you can upgrade these abilities to make those stronger so that you can do a further distance, but you're going to start with only being able to shift them like one space, which isn't very strong at all. You've got the ability to move tiles as one of your actions, and by moving tiles it's different than shifting, so you're actually using that to slam them into the other tiles, because instead of shifting a whole row, you're just taking a small section and moving it into another stationary land. Thus using that to create your land, and also possibly turn land into volcanoes if you go over the 4. So then you have the ability as an action also to erupt the volcanoes, or to just place a level 3 volcano anywhere if you want to do that instead. You've got the ability to send your workers to study. And this is one of the things that you're going to have to do early on in the game, and use that to manipulate your board with too, because when you send one to study, they're going to you've got 2 little sections on your board for 2 workers to sit at. When you send them to study, you can either you're either sending them on that action or you're returning them back. But when you send them to study, if you have sacred sites built out on the board, you can also send them out to those sacred sites instead of that little 2 space spot on the player board. But when you bring them back on a later turn, you're gonna get wisdom for that. So you get one wisdom for each of those workers that you bring back, and in doing that, you also are sending those workers from one of the sections on the board. So it's a good way to like open up a space. If you have the send to or return from study action available on your board, you can use that to open up another space on your board to be able to do a different action on that turn. But you're kind of going to find that you're likely to have to do that early on in order to be able to get anywhere quickly on the game, as to actually take turns sending workers off and bringing them back, which is it takes a long time. Each time you do that, you're only sending one worker out. You've got 2 spaces on your player board for them again, but that would mean then that you would have to take 2 separate actions of sending, and again, you can only do this up to 2 times on your turn, because if you put a worker on the send, then you have to remove the worker off the send and then put another worker back on the send action there. You would do all that in order to just get your 2 workers out, and then you have to wait till your next turn to be able to then remove that worker back off the send to somewhere else, and then put another worker back on send one more time in order to get your workers back, so that you can get the 2 wisdom in order to move up the track a little bit. So every time you take wisdom here, you'll be able to go up the ability tracks, 1 for every wisdom that you spend, and you can kind of spread them out as you want to. The other thing you can do is journey your workers, so you can, if they're already out on the board, you can move them around, but they can only move 1 space at a time as it is, and it's hugely limiting, and and it's a hard track to want to go up too high on because you don't get points for it at the end. Whereas the other tracks, if you get all the way to the top of each one of them, you get 7 points for each of them. It's one of the few ways you're getting points is by upgrading these tracks all the way up to the top. But yeah, so that's really limiting, especially when we come to the last action. The sixth action here is to build a sacred site. So when you're moving the map around and you're slamming these lands into to each other, eventually you're going to have those level 4 land tiles, and when you smash those two level 4 land tiles together, once you're able to, once they're positioned just right, which is not always very often, everything gets shifted around so much. But if the opportunity comes up and you can finally smash a couple level 4s together, you're going to create a mountain. And again, the mountain's going to be this like base for these sacred sites to be built upon. So your sacred sites are like you have a monolith, a shrine, and a temple. Everybody has these. They've got 3 of each. Whenever you place one on a mountain, you're going to do them in levels. So the monolith is like the base, and then the shrine's a little bit smaller. It sits on top of a monolith, and the temple sits on top of the shrine. But you can only ever have one of yours on each mountain tile, so you have to move your guy around in order to get over to another mountain to build another sacred site. Meanwhile, if you leave them on that site and other people build on top of you, then you get a little bit of wisdom. But then it's very Euro-y in that sense, because you really don't want to have to leave your worker there. You don't have any other way to get a worker on the board unless you take that send or the send to or return from study action, because you have to have the shrine open, or whatever sacred site that you have built there. You have to have that open without your worker there, and then you have to take the send action, put a worker onto it, and then move it off with that journey action in order to get it somewhere else. And you're also limited to only having one worker on the board in the beginning, so you have to like upgrade your little that action to send to or return from study so that you can have additional workers on the board. And the reason why I'm bringing that all up right now is because when you build one of those, whether you're building the monolith, shrine, or temple, it becomes another space that has to be moved through when you go on that board. So you've got the mountain at the base. You build the monolith. You'll pop up onto the monolith. And now to get off of the monolith, you have to spend an action just to get back down to the mountain base, and then another journey action in order to get off of it, unless you upgrade your journeys. Again, journey's not worth points, so it's like you have to really balance when you're going to do that. I found that it's nice to just have like 2 movement kind of early on with that, because I found like I was getting kind of stuck with my worker. But if I have 2 movement, I can then pop him off. He can build a monolith, which is the first level, and then if he's got 2 movement, he can get off the monolith and get off the mountain. But if you're on the mountain and there's already another worker, or another person's monolith built there and another person's shrine built there, and then you'll build the temple, which is, it's good. It gives you a lot of wisdom. It gives you get progressively more wisdom for each level that you built. So the monolith's worth 1 wisdom, and again, wisdom is kind of this currency for the game that you're using to upgrade your abilities. But you've got 1 wisdom for the monolith, and then 2 if you built the shrine, 3 if you built the temple, and if you are the first one to build a temple, you're probably going to use those points to make your guys able to move faster, because it's going to take you 3 movement. You'd have to go from the temple, so you go to the shrine, the monolith, and then to the base. You're not even off the tile at that point, and you had to spend 3 movement just to do that. So you really get kind of landlocked on these tiles. But as you go, you can put other workers out. It gets expensive to do this stuff because you're really limited on time on this game. You've got to deal with the ascension track that these Automa are moving up on. Now, if you play whether you're playing solo or 2-player, you're going to learn how to play solo as well, because you have to learn how to run one of the Automas. Automas are really easy. They have like a deck of like 12 cards, and on each card it gives you some icons at the top. They're either going to do one thing or another thing or another thing if they're able to. It gives you a section of the board that it happens at. These get really quick and intuitive. I felt like definitely by the time I played it the first game, I was able to read these really quickly. I still had to keep the rule book. It has a nice player aid on the back that'll kind of show you all these icons really quick. But then some of them you'll still have to kind of review. You have to get the larger instructions for them to really understand how they work. But overall, I didn't feel like it was too terrible to like get into the rule book and get the information I needed to start making these Automa turns play out really quickly. But these Automa, a lot of the time at the end of their action, they're going to just get to move up the ascension track. Now, when you move up the ascension track, it's kind of hard to do so. Usually, you have to every time you build a sacred site, you get to move up 2 spaces. There's 15 spaces to move up to on the smaller side of the ascension track, or you can play the larger side that goes up to 21. I've only played the 15 sides twice now, but with that smaller side. Those Automa, again, they're moving up 2 and 1 on a lot of their turns. They end up moving up it really quickly, whereas you have to actually work your way and get over somewhere and build a monolith or build a shrine or whatever. Now, one thing that really helped me a lot, though, when I played the very first game, I did terribly because I was just learning the mechanics of how the game works, and I was just kind of spreading out my actions and doing a lot on the board. One of the things that you do on this board is as you're upgrading, if you upgrade everything in one row, like all the different actions up one, then you get to get an extra worker. And I thought that maybe would be useful, but the workers really get in the way because they're getting in the way on the player board and they're getting in the way of you taking actions. And so I don't even really know. It would have to be a long game. You definitely would have to play on there's a larger side of the game board, as well as again the larger ascension track. But I would have to think that I would need a longer game in order to make that really viable. But one thing that does happen is every time that you do get everything up to the same level, you get to start gaining points for all of your workers that are in study. But they still, it's still a not the most viable strategy from what I could tell. I did again pretty terribly on my first game. But on the second game, I decided to go on make myself really powerful in one direction, and that allowed me to do a lot more on the board. Even though I was just basically only doing one action a lot. Whenever you upgrade one of the first 4 actions, each one of those not only gives you 7 points at the end of the game if you have it all the way upgraded, but it lets you ascend 1 every time you take that action. So you can ascend for 2 every turn after you get up to that level, which means that that's going to take you 5 wisdom in order to get there. Again, wisdom's not easy to come by. We already talked about how you're sending and returning these guys back from study in order to get wisdom, which is lengthy to do. And then when you're building temples and shrines and monoliths, if you build a temple, it's nice, you get 3 wisdom. Again, you're probably going to spend, at least the first time, you're going to want to spend that wisdom in order to get your guy off the dang, to be able to move him off of the shrine. And otherwise, you're going to use, you're going to have to use one of those wisdom in order just to be able to have an additional worker on the board. There's this whole thing with the movement and being able to do things, but having a strong single action ability, like I had the shifting ability really upgraded, so that allowed me to move mountains, allowed me to really kind of do that thing like I was saying, like I wasn't able to smash many mountains or smash many lands together. Well, actually I was, because the original action on that allows you to move 3. It's like the not artful way of moving land pieces, because you have to move a chunk of 3 at a time instead of being able to move like a single one around, and they have to go orthogonally. But with that shifting ability, I was able to kind of like do that whole puzzle thing, shift things around, I could actually smash three in together, so I could set things up in ways that were really helpful to me. But mountains can't smash into mountains, so you do have that limitation. Um, but overall, though, I found it a lot more enjoyable the second time I played it. I felt like it was really quick to do the Automa. You have whenever you play any game of Oros, you're gonna have to have three demigods out on the board, which means if you're playing solo, you've got to have two separate Automa. You can have all three if you want to. Now I played with the Fertile Land and the Great Waters. Fertile Land's considered competitive. Great Waters is considered friendly. I took the Raging Fire out on my second go around. I don't know if that made the biggest difference on it or not, but they're considered to be aggressive. So the way the cards and their actions play out on the Automa's board will tend to reflect those kind of flavors of their personalities. But I found that moving the Automa, doing all their actions was not terribly difficult, and actually pretty quick by the end of it. I felt like I was really moving through those abilities. Now the Automa have a backside on this. It's kind of like their abilities are just kind of available. They just do whatever that's on their card. They don't have to like upgrade to do special actions. They can just pop a whole mountain up on the board at different times, or they can just remove like the hard-earned land that you've created off of the board. So it can kind of be a pain in the butt in that way. But what they're doing every time they gain wisdom for any reason in a normal way that a regular person would, they move up this like point track on the board that starts increasing their end game points. So I did find there were ways to kind of get in the way of the Automa and mess with their ability to do things. They're only working off certain sections on the board, so there's four corner tiles on the board, at least on the small one that I played with, that they can't activate anything on or do anything. So you can kind of stick a land over there if you want to, in order to keep them from being able to do something with it on their turn. But otherwise, it's kind of random. You're kind of just getting random stuff going on, again with the flavor of the particular demigod that you're playing with. But I found that it was perfectly adequate to give you a challenge, to give you something. You had to stay with them on the Ascension board. You want to stay with them on that Ascension board, because anytime you are on one of the spaces of this board, all these little circles representing the spaces here, if you move up a space and somebody is in the space that you were moving into, you get to move up to the next available space. So if there's two people in front of you and you move on up one space, you get to move up essentially three. But if you've got two people in front of you and you're moving two spaces or whatever, you don't get to like move two additional spaces past them. You count the spaces still, but it's still a great way to keep moving up the track, and you definitely have to stay with those Automa, because they move so much more quickly, more easily than you do, at least in the beginning of the game. But I did catch up to them. I was the first one at the top of the Ascension track, which means I got 15 extra points. I started at the end of the game, and I still came in second. But it was fun though, and I felt like I was much more competitive on the second one. I definitely want to play it again. Overall, I thought it was just really fun mechanics, different. I really liked just the whole puzzly nature of shifting things around, the creative ways. I had some of my turns were really long at first, because I was like, well, if I do this, then I can't do that, and then my worker's in the way on my turn, and then if I need to do that and I did wait, now I can't do any of this, hang on, I gotta go back. And so I had to keep kind of reworking some of my turns. And they do give you some little like tokens to kind of place on the spaces that you're going to do turns at, so you can plan them out. And that's mostly for you to be able to plan out your turn while somebody else is taking a turn. But since I was the only one playing, even still, I was using these sometimes because some of my turns were getting so complicated in my head. But There were plenty of other turns that weren't terribly complicated, but you are going to find some time with other people where you're going to run into a little bit of AP. So be aware of that. And just use that time to plan out your own turn and try to get ready for it. Now, playing with the Automa, things shift so much. They're able to just make things happen that a player can't do, and so it's kind of hard to really plan ahead with them. You just got to kind of hope things don't get shifted around too much, but or have a game plan that allows you to kind of fix it back, like I did with the shifting ability that I had. I was able to kind of shift things really quickly and gain those ascension points when I did so. So it was actually kind of nice to use that as much as possible. But I would say that like what people may not like about the game is they may not like the fact that you can't like do everything on the board. You're gonna feel like you're going in kind of a direct pathway in a lot of ways, or I don't know. I haven't played the game enough to know all of the different strategies that you could go through. I'm sure there's a handful of viable ones out there, but you can't do like everything. You have to pick some ways that you're going on the board. And that action that AP that action analysis paralysis could definitely be rough if you're playing with some people that have a hard time working out these different turns and being able to work out the worker placement and the way that the workers get in each other's way. I think the art it appeals to me. I think it's cute. I think it's simple. It's colorful. It's bright. It kind of has this like the islandy feel to it, and the little meeples have these little printed on little faces or whatever that go along with them and have a little bit of artwork. Some people might find these to look a little too simple, or maybe the game art too simple for them. But I found it very endearing and cute, and I think it worked really well with the kind of I don't know this kind of vibrant, puzzly little feel, cozy kind of feel to this game. It felt nice, and I enjoyed that quite a bit. So overall, rate this an 8 out of 10. I think it's a very solid game. Really enjoyed my time with it. Enjoyed learning the game. I think the rule book was really well laid out. I love the theme of the game. I love the way that it is reminiscent of Populous at the beginning. Very different game, but just the fact that you've got this powerful shaman, you've got followers, you're gaining wisdom, becoming more powerful as you go. I really enjoyed all of that. I think the artwork is really well done for this type of game. It's fun, it's bright, it's simple, and so it kind of alludes to the kind of simple actions and things that you can do on your turn while kind of belying some of the secret complexity of this game. It's relatively complex. I'd rate it like a good, medium weight of a game. But yeah, check out Oros. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Now, I could see that score of 8 either going up or down as I continue to play the game. Now, if I find that as I play, the avenues for victory become very narrow, so that if we find that there's only one really good strategy or like 2 or 3 that you're really kind of stuck, you got to pick one or the other, then I could see that score going down. But looking at the board, I feel like there's a lot of not so obvious ways that you could score a lot of points if you're careful in how you plan it out. So I'm looking forward to checking that out as well. But check out Oros. Keep an eye out for it at your local game store. I think this retails for $50. I want to say I spent about $35 for it online, but it's worth $50. So if you want to support your local game store, I think it's definitely worth the buy. But otherwise, keep an eye out for additional content like this. I believe I I may try to rope Sean from Peck Tech Games into play a game of Oros with me, and maybe we'll do a multiplayer review. But this was the solo review of Oros. So again, thank you so much for stopping by. Really appreciate it. If you enjoy this content, a couple free clicks can really help out channels like mine. But otherwise, I hope you all have just a wonderful day, and I hope you are enjoying your games. And until next time, thanks so much for stopping by. Have a great day. Bye-bye.